This was a day of celebration. But it turned into a day of tragedy.
How does a birthday party turn into a shootout?
People are running around and there's random gunshots going every direction. And then it turns out this 11-year-old boy shot and killed.
My phone rang. My sister was crying. Ephraim's been shot.
A little boy is dead. He was shot in the neck. We've got to figure out why this happened.
Two rival gangs come into contact with each other. It doesn't matter whether it's a birthday party or whether it's a baptism. It's not going to end well.
It was a recipe for disaster.
Welcome to Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart. Tonight, a deadly surge in gang violence in 2007 was gripping North American cities, with the youth paying the price. Territorial wars spilled out on playgrounds, in neighborhoods, on busy streets, with children caught in the crossfire. Here now is Karen Lieberman with a recipe for disaster.
Summer in the heart of the city. A neighborhood is getting ready for a big celebration.
It was a birthday party for 3 different individuals. The young boy's birthday party earlier in the afternoon, I think he was turning 6. As the evening wore on, it transitioned over to a birthday party for 2 young teenagers. I think they were turning 18.
Birthday party for my cousin and her friend. They were close and they were like, hey, we're born around the same time, let's do this party, right? And they did, and the whole community was gonna be there.
Amiga's mom, sister Kamisha, brother Ephraim, and dad recently moved to this complex.
My aunt lived there with my cousins and Ephraim's cousins. Like, it seemed like a good option for my family to move into. More space, a backyard. There was a park closer to my mother's unit. My mother has always been super protective over Ephraim and Kamisha, so they didn't always get to hang out outside with everyone.
I think they lived 2 doors down from where this party was taking place. Some of the other younger kids in that age group really were attending the 6-year-old's birthday party earlier in the day, and they were helping out.
A lot of music was playing, family members were around, kids just running up and down in the parking lot.
Tonight, a rare chance for them to stay up past their bedtime.
After the 6-year-old party kind of fizzled out and it turned into the more teenage party, the younger kids in that age group, 10, 11, 12, 13, those kids all stayed around. You're not going to expect them to go to bed at 8 o'clock at night on a summer night when there's a big party going on.
There might have been maybe over 50 people at the party, if not more.
So they cut the cake and they start serving cake around.
I had work the next morning, so I was like, all right, love y'all, see y'all later, And by the time I got to my apartment building, I had literally just walked through my front doors and my phone rang and I answered it and my sister was crying, screaming, Ephraim's been shot. Ephraim's been shot. And I was like, what? Like, what you know?
I don't even know where I got the phone from. I just remember calling my sister and letting her know that Ephraim's been shot. And I just remember her yelling on the phone, what? Like, what are you talking about? And I just said, Ephraim's been shot.
I remember running down the stairs of my apartment building and I ran until I saw a taxi. And when we pulled up, there was flashing lights everywhere and police cars everywhere, an ambulance. People, so many people everywhere. When I jump out of the taxi and I try to find who I could.
And it felt like 2 minutes because she had left the party And it felt like in 2 minutes she arrived. I don't even know how I got to the hospital. I just remember I just ended up at the hospital.
I just remember being at the hospital and being in a room, and somebody coming in to say to us that they're working on him. And I was like, what is happening? Like, we later learned that he was already dead.
In 2007, summertime, I was in the homicide squad. I was woken up by my phone just before 2 o'clock in the morning, I believe. At this point, we know that there was an 11-year-old boy that had been shot and killed, that it was at a birthday party. So at that point, thinking, what's going on and what is this about?
So it was a regular Saturday night on night shift here in the forensic unit. Our clerk took a phone call from 31 Division saying that there had been a homicide involving, at the time they thought was a young teenage male. With 5 months on in the forensic unit, the detective looked at me and he said, "Saddle up, you're going to this homicide with me." And it's the first homicide I'm attending. So when we started our walkthrough, we were on the south side of the complex. There was an asphalt pathway with short fencing on either side. You notice when you look into the yard on your right, there's a picnic table covered with a Spider-Man tablecloth. There was all the evidence of a party. There was like cups and paper plates and plastic cutlery. So as you're walking along that and you get up closer to the tunnel, the first thing I see on my left is a kid's scooter, and then you notice emergency services medical debris left behind. There's an iPod on the ground with headphones attached to it still. As we continued through the breezeway, there was broken glass on the ground in front of unit number 5. We had information that the young man who'd been shot was pulled into unit number 6. So inside that unit, we had one shoe and a little bit of blood on the ground just inside the entrance into number 6. We walked out the back, the north side of the tunnel, and we walked through the parking lot area because there had been a vehicle found that had been struck by a couple of bullets. And officers on the scene had also found other bullets and bullet fragments on the north and northwest side of the parking lot area where the entrance comes in off the street and behind Shepherd.
Homicide detectives get a call about another victim who has just walked into emergency.
We were told he had been, I believe, shot in the leg and that he was conscious. He was at the hospital. And my partner and I, we head over to the hospital where he is. So I think it was about 4 o'clock in the morning. We go into the room that he's in. He's in just a treatment room. He's by himself. He didn't want to provide a statement to us about being shot. He didn't want to say who did it to him. And so at that point, he's free to go home, and hopefully we'll speak to you later. We seized his clothes. I think he had a pair of blue jeans of some sort, running shoes, a white t-shirt with some different colors on it, different patterns on it, but it was mainly white. And I think there was some sort of hoodie. We seized his clothes and took those away as part of the investigation.
As the sun comes up, detectives speak with Ephraim's sisters.
I just remember going to the police station and just meeting with the 2 detectives that were assigned to the case.
They come into a room with me and we just sit down and talk about the events of the night.
I saw something. A group of guys were coming down. We didn't know who they were. I just remember adults saying, like, you know, get out of here or whatever. They did end up leaving and then coming back eventually later in the night. At that point, I was not with my brother. We were separated at that time. And then shots went off. As I'm about to run towards, I guess, the direction of my brother, I get pulled into my aunt's house. And at this point, we're kind of taking shelter because we believe it is gunshots and not fireworks of any sorts. I would say it felt like maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds. I had a cousin bang down the door and said, "Ephraim has been shot." I'm just running in a direction, just trying to see where my brother is.
And do you get to him?
I just remember he was just leaning on somebody's lap from the community. I don't remember who she was. And I just remember looking at him and kind of laughing and saying, hey, like, you're gonna be all right. We're gonna laugh about this at school next week. And then all I remember is somebody yelling, they're turning back around. And we get separated going into 2 units, side by side.
there had been quite a bit of chaos in that breezeway with people trying to find safety when the bullets started flying. Seeing the scooter there and seeing the iPod with the headphones on it and knowing that Ephraim Brown had been pulled into unit number 6 for his safety and to provide first aid to him, you're thinking, okay, was he in the breezeway? Do we have shooting going north and south? Was he struck in the breezeway? So we later found out that the iPod belonged to Ephraim Brown.
Ephraim ended up being shot once, and he was shot in the neck, and it went in his neck and out the backside, and that was a fatal wound to him.
Detectives hold a press conference and plead for help.
You've had approximately 24 hours to think about the devastating impact that the murder of an 11-year-old child will have on the family and that particular community. And now I expect you to call us with regards to what you saw that day.
In the first, 24 or 48 hours, you're focused. You want to find out who did this.
Welcome back to Crime Beat. As daylight breaks, the full horror comes into view. A birthday party turned crime scene. An 11-year-old boy shot and killed in a moment of senseless violence. We now return to Karen Lieberman with a recipe for disaster.
As daylight breaks, the horrors of a homicide scene come into focus.
Just seeing the scope and the size of the scene, how big the space was that was used for this shooting. It was hundreds of feet in distance around, and we're finding evidence.
Evidence of a gun battle that took the life of 11-year-old Ephraim Brown.
It's only one son. He's my pride and joy. And I beg him to wake up.
He took his last breath in his aunt's arms.
But I know he don't deserve it. He didn't deserve it. And I don't think nobody deserves to be shot.
And I hope they don't sleep at night and think of what they have done to my little boy.
I was the pastor of the church there, right across the street. When we got there on that Sunday morning, there was yellow police tape and quite a few police cars right across the street. A young boy was shot and killed the night before, literally on the doorsteps of the church. I mean, right there. And so it was devastating. People came across the street from our neighborhood and just started holding hands together with us and prayed.
The community pays tribute to a boy who had only just moved here months ago.
Ephraim was the best. He was the sweetest young man. There isn't very much to not love about an 11-year-old who loved his family and loved school and loved sports and was kind and caring. So Ephraim was really the light of our family, the youngest of 3 children, and we loved him a lot. When my mother had brought Ephraim home from the hospital, I remember looking at this little baby, like he was just so tiny and so cute, so cute. And I remember him laying on the couch.
That's a baby brother.
I remember telling him, I love you so much. Ephraim and Kamisha, man, so close. Best friends.
To describe the relationship, I'd say we were probably like 2 peas in a pod. Wherever he was, I was. If I went to a family member's house, we're like a package deal, so we had to go together. We did a lot at home, like we played games. When my mom tried to discipline us, my brother, would put spit on his eye to make it look like he's crying, but he wasn't crying. Just 2 peas in a pod.
My sister loved Ephraim to the core, still does, and we all knew Ephraim felt the same way. I truly have no words for the trauma I know my sister endured.
Rookie forensic detective Rhonda Haley works to piece together what happened.
After we had done our initial photos, we then put down evidence markers, and then we start collecting those items. And when it came around to picking up the iPod, I was like, I can hear music coming from that still. So it was kind of unsettling, but the fact that someone was enjoying listening to their music when all this happened.
I still have that MP3 player, actually, to this day. The last song that was playing on there was Kanye West, Can't Tell Me Nothing.
From piecing things together, the time of the cake service, the time of the shooting occurred, finding those items, Ephraim's probably standing there, leaning up against the wall, listening to his music, eating his cake. When the shots start to ring out and he ends up getting hit in the crossfire, oblivious to what's going on. I went to the autopsy of Ephraim. When they started doing the removal of the clothing from Ephraim, what is he wearing? He's wearing Spider-Man underwear. And what hit me at that point was that my son, who was just a couple years younger, he had the exact same pair of underwear. Seeing that was a big hit for me as well. We need to, find witnesses. We need people to come forward. Like, why did this happen and who's involved? And, give us some answers.
Can you move back over to this side here?
Police start bringing in people for questioning, starting with one of the birthday girls.
It is now approximately 3:29.
One of the girls happens to be the cousin of young Ephraim Brown, of the family, of the Brown family. Kashana Thomas is her name. She talked about the kid's birthday party and what was going on and how everybody's having a great time. Then it transitioned over to her birthday party. They brought in a DJ. There was music playing. There was people all over the place. And there was people in the north side. There was people in the south side. And she tells us about a group of people that arrived that she didn't know. She later comes to find out that this group that comes are people that her friend LaTanya invited to the party, because it was her party too. They both invited different groups. At some point in time, the vibe really changed, and they could see the two groups staring at each other and making faces, and they call it like a screw face. They're looking at each other, and things aren't looking good. And people all around are starting to get nervous about these two different groups. After they've served the cake around, that's when things happen. She tells us that she's in the back parking lot, which is on the north side of the complex, when she starts to hear gunshots. She immediately looks over and she can see guns being fired and smoke kind of filling the walkway in between two townhouses.
Okay, what number is that?
6 o'clock.
She notices and gives a description of two of the people that are actually shooting.
Okay, and where do you recognize that person from?
He was a shooter. They called him MI.
He was the shooter?
He was from the 5PG guys in all white.
In all white?
He had gold grills on.
Gold grills?
And he had the gold chain on.
Okay. And what, do you know him by any specific name?
No, just MI or Mischief.
She says this is a guy that goes by the nickname of MI or Mischief. And, right away we're, things are going off in our heads because, hey, that's the guy in the hospital that we just interviewed.
And I'm just going to show this picture to the camera.
We thought we had two victims, one in the hospital, one deceased. We now determine that we've identified one of the shooters that may have been involved in the shooting and murder of Ephraim Brown, Vakil Eubanks.
She also identifies a second shooter.
This is either Red's or Red's older brother.
Okay.
I'm unsure, but I think this one is Red's.
Okay. And where do you know Red's from?
He was a shooter from the Baghdad crew.
We know that he was invited to the party by the other party organizer.
They discover that Red's is Gregory Sappleton.
We know that Ephraim was shot while inside the tunnel, and we know that we have two guys that are firing basically with him in between them.
And so they're charged?
They are charged. They're charged with second-degree murder.
Welcome back. A witness has identified 2 suspects in the shooting death of 11-year-old Ephraim Brown, triggering a citywide manhunt. Now, the community that was celebrating the birthdays of 2 18-year-old girls will soon discover the problem was who was on the guest list. We return now to Karen Lieberman with a recipe for disaster.
Warrants go out for suspects 20-year-old Akil Eubank and 21-year-old Gregory Sappleton.
We don't know whose bullet killed Ephraim Brown. At this point, we have 2 people that have been identified shooting at each other. So right in this area here is where our main witness, Kashana, was at the time of the shooting when it started. And inside the tunnel at the time, we had Ephraim in there, his cousin Kiefer, another guy named Rugged, and on the far side, we had Akil Eubanks. So he would have been on the south end of the tunnel. And on this end of the tunnel, just at the entrance there, we have Sappleton. And what Kashana tells us is that at that time, she sees a shooting erupt. And she sees Sappleton shooting in the direction of where Akil is, and Akil shooting in the direction of where Sappleton is. She couldn't tell us for sure who started shooting, but she said she saw smoke coming out of the end of Sappleton's gun when the shooting did erupt.
Forensic detective Rhonda Haley discovers evidence that paints an even more complex picture.
I was walking down the pathway back towards Shepherd, and I happened to notice that there was exposed wood, and I say that because the boards on the fence had all been painted green, but there was this weird shaped splintery section where I could see the natural wood color. And being new to all this, I wasn't sure, and I went and grabbed Detective Hicks, and I brought him over and I said, "What's this?" And he leaned over the fence and looked at the other side, and he looked at me and he goes, "That's a bullet hole." So now we're looking at this going, there's east-west gunfire now, not just north and south through that breezeway. So how many shooters do we have? Now we realize there's gunfire coming from basically all angles. We actually got in contact with the Center of Forensic Science and asked them to come out and help us analyze bullet trajectory through the fence boards, so we might have a better idea of where people could have been standing when shots were fired.
A witness sees something in these bushes.
She sees muzzle flashes coming from behind these bushes going in a west direction, and sees a muzzle flash, hears a number of volleys of shots, and then hears somebody running back through the alley. A couple seconds later, hears cars, squealing tires, and the car is leaving, obviously. So, you know, what we had at this point is basically a running gun battle, people shooting back and forth now east-west, as opposed to what we know where Ephraim shot was north-south. We have a dynamic situation of a shooting. People are not standing still in one position. They are running. This is a gun battle. This is people firing, running, moving positions, changing positions. So that would account for some of the evidence that we have in relation to what you found.
Right. And detectives uncover the battle continued in the back of the complex.
The forensic officers are walking around the scene. We start to see more stuff. And we noticed the car that was sitting in this parking spot had a broken front passenger side window, and the windshield had a hole in it. And then on further examination of that car that was sitting here, it was like a silver hatchback of sorts. It actually had a bullet hole right above the license plate, but just to the left of the emblem on the back of the hatch. And we had it towed back to the forensic unit. Well, they were able to determine that obviously the bullet in the back of it had come from a south direction headed north, and they managed to get the bullet out of there, and it was in pretty good shape still. And then on the side passenger window, we were able to determine that the bullet that had gone through the front passenger side window had then gone through the front windshield of the vehicle, because we had glass kind of pushing out on the front windshield, which determines an exit.
You know, we have the car situated really in this parking spot right here. We have a potential of one of the bullets coming from this laneway over here, possibly, where we know one of the shooters ran from our prior witness statements. And we also have the laneway where the shooting originally erupted right here, where Sappleton and Eubanks were. That shootout, which is almost directly in line with the back of the vehicle as well. So, you know, potentially they could have been coming from the 2 laneways here. So we have an 11-year-old witness that tells us she heard the shots erupt, looked out her window. She looked over onto the roadway and actually saw a dark-colored vehicle there. She saw the window come down and an arm come out of the window. Flashes of light coming from the end of the person's arm. And that was aimed towards the party and towards where the tunnel is. I think it's safe to say that there was multiple gun battles kind of going on at the same time in the north end of the complex, in the south end of the complex, and in the tunnel.
They mark ballistic evidence and bring it back to Forensic Identification Services. Each bullet is swabbed and sent to the Center of Forensic Sciences. One is of great interest.
Larry Hicks, my detective, was walking down here and he happened to notice a bullet laying on the ground. So just the part that comes out of the end of the firearm was laying around in this area. We gave it number 10 and I tested it and it actually had Ephraim's DNA on it.
And if Ephraim was over near the tunnel at the time when he was shot and the bullet is over here going south,
yes,
what does that tell us?
That I would guess the shooter was on the north side.
And that he was shot with a bullet coming from the north to the south.
That's right.
To say for certain how many shots there were, about 15, maybe more, we can say that at least 4 guns were used. Likely more, but at least 4.
News comes that arrests have been made.
Police say Akil Eubank was taken into custody around 10 o'clock Sunday night.
Akil was arrested by the gun and gang unit. I believe he was arrested at his house, came in without any issues with Reds or Sappleton. They found him at his apartment. Now we have 2 people in custody for this murder of the 11-year-old Ephraim Brown.
Crown Attorney Donna Armstrong is assigned to the case.
We needed something to explain all this behavior. Why does a birthday party explode into a shooting gallery in this relatively quiet area and a little boy ends up dead?
They soon discover that members of 2 rival gangs were unknowingly invited to attend.
So baby boy, listen carefully. You can trust us to bring evil to its truth, and that justice will be brought upon the heads of the animals that did this to you.
On September 7th, 2010, the trial begins.
A young child has been shot at a birthday party. I mean, it doesn't get more intense than that. So yeah, there was huge coverage.
What stands out in a case like this is the overwhelming presumption of guilt and culpability that the public has in cases such as this, emotional cases, and that's what we have to contend with, unfortunately. But our clients are innocent until proven guilty.
Several witnesses are expected to testify during this trial, including a woman who saw both the accused firing shots at each other right into the path of Ephraim Brown.
We've got to give the jury more than just how it happened, where it happened. We've got to figure out why this happened.
So this is really one of the first big cases where a gang expert was involved. If a jury doesn't understand the rival gangs and how violence can happen between them, they're not going to understand the motive of how this happened.
The Crown fights to call gang expert Detective Doug Backus to the stand.
So Akil Eubank showed up with Sheldon Evans, I believe, to this birthday party. Both were known to me as members of the 5 Point Generals just through Project Corral, which intercepted like hundreds of phone calls and interceptions between those gang members.
He came to the party with 5PG carved in his hair. He just apparently got a new haircut that day with 5PG carved in it.
A normal person wouldn't be walking around with those tattoos or it shaved into their heads if they weren't affiliated to that gang.
The 5PG were known to control the territory of an area in the northwest of Toronto.
They refer to them as the Twin Towers. This is 1765 and 1775 Weston Road, and then across the street, 5 Bellevue. And this whole strip is controlled by 5PG at that time. There's an interesting piece of graffiti that was found in the 5PG territory, like a family tree, 5PG family. Akil Eubank's nickname was on that tree as Mischief. And so these were the things I used and brought to court with me to show that Akil Eubanks was a member of the 5 Point Generals at the time.
20 minutes away by car from Weston and Lawrence is 1880 Shepherd Avenue West.
Shepherd was sort of unclaimed territory. Right above that was totally blood territory. You had the grassways, the laneways. And then above that even was all Crip territory, like north of Finch. You can see in some of their graffiti and blood areas, they have 5 Point crown, they have 3 Point crowns where it's Crip affiliated. When you go back to the colors of red and blue, blue being the Crips, red being the Bloods, and so, you know, it's a perfect storm of gangs in one small area.
Reds, when it came to him, there was, a number of people that identified him by the nickname Reds, and that he was from the Baghdad crew, about a kilometer or so away from this complex.
And I learned that they were, a group comprised of about 15, and they called that area Little Baghdad. For Gregory Sappleton, if this happened through Kashana Thomas's statement, for him to come down with 12, 13 people, he's coming down there for a reason.
And Sappleton, he was dressed in red with all the buddies that came with him. He had tattoos, Reds, R-E-D-Z, on his body.
So this is indicative to me of them hearing that there's some 5 Point Generals there and then coming down as a huge gang to confront them.
It's sort of like you've got one gang on one side, one gang on the other. This is the gang that thinks they belong there. This is the gang that's intruding on their so-called territory. Them being there was like a red flag to a bull.
It doesn't take long for the shooting to start, so it's obviously a gang confrontation.
In an unusual twist, they're being tried together.
Unusual is a good word. These two guys now sitting beside each other in the same prisoner's box, who were shooting guns at each other a couple of years ago.
In court, questions arise as to whether these two groups were actually gangs.
When we called Sheldon Evans, he said that 5 Point Generals was a rap group. And I always sort of regret not asking him to sing us some tunes.
Was 5PG ever a rap group?
No.
Did you hear that come up?
Yes. The jury had to take all that evidence and decide for themselves.
We had to prove that Sappleton was on one side, Eubank was on the other side, and they were shooting at each other.
We know that Ephraim was shot while inside the tunnel, and we know that we have two guys that are firing basically with him in between them. It doesn't really matter who fired the shot that killed the person. You're both culpable for it.
But I know the gang is called 5PG.
An 18-year-old is the only one to identify the alleged shooters out of a party of over 50 people.
How many men did you see walking away?
When I watched that video, I was actually pretty impressed. She was identifying people, she was putting them in position, she was describing the gunfire. Then, near the end of the statement, something changed.
Over the period of time that we had to wait for the prelim and the trial, a number of things happened that made Kashana hesitant. She started to feel threatened. I think it was coming from both sides of the different gangs that were around, even up until and when we were at trial.
This one day, she's on the stand and I see her stop. And she was really obviously scared. And I thought, what? And I looked around and 3 guys had walked in the courtroom.
They're all wearing sunglasses, and we had to take a break at that point because she was physically shaken and felt intimidated by this tactic that was deployed by someone to send these people in.
In Kashana's statement, she says very clearly that she sees Sappleton on the north side shooting towards the south, and Eubank on the south side shooting north through the breezeway.
Eubank's clothing, seized from him at hospital, was sent for gunshot residue analysis.
So he had a sweatshirt and there was a bullet hole in the sweatshirt. They came back and found is that there was a couple of particles of gunshot residue on the sweater. So that was inconclusive in putting a gun in the hand of Akil Eubanks.
No guns were recovered from the scene, but bullet number 10 with Ephraim's DNA is entered as evidence.
The bullet that killed Ephraim likely came from a shooter that was on the north end of the plaza shooting south. And what we know at this point is that Sappleton, or Reds, was one of the people that we have identified as firing from the north. So highly likely that it was Sappleton's bullet or someone from his side, if it wasn't him, that killed Ephraim Brown.
There was a lot of shooting. So the defense wanted it to be seen that the east-west shooting was the one that killed Ephraim. So when he was sitting on the fence eating his birthday cake, that the east-west guy could have shot him. Didn't really make sense because Ephraim got off the fence and went into the tunnel.
I hear the first 3 gunshots, and after we ran.
Ephraim's 12-year-old cousin testifies that he was with him last.
And Kiefer is yelling at Ephraim to run, but he doesn't hear him because he's got his MP4 players on. And he doesn't hear being told to run, he doesn't hear, oh, it still bothers me, because yeah. Doesn't hear. And he gets shot in the neck. And right in the neck, and that's a pretty small target when you think about it, isn't it? A little boy's neck. And when they find him, the music's still playing on his MP4 player.
The Crown's key witness tells the jury of a possible motive.
She indicated to us that about a week or so before the birthday party, there's a plaza about a kilometer away from the housing complex. There was a beef that happened with Reds where he allegedly pulled a gun on a Crips member that was named Rugged.
Doug Backus gave evidence at trial that he believed Jermaine Rover, known as Rugged, was a gang member.
Jermaine Rover was part of the Brown Bricks crew, which is Falstaff, Crips area.
We later discovered that Rugged was in the tunnel when the shooting started.
Now, the target, I believed, was Rugged. It was a recipe for disaster.
Welcome back. With just one witness willing to identify the alleged shooters, the question now, will it be enough to secure a conviction in the murder of 11-year-old Ephraim Brown? Here's Karen Lieberman with the shocking conclusion of a recipe for disaster.
The Brown family attends the 3-month-long trial, anxiously waiting for justice to be served.
Their case would come down to the testimony of Ephraim Brown's cousin, who would tell this jury that she saw both men firing shots in the boy's direction.
There are like expert witnesses, police officers that didn't spend as much time in the stand as she had to, didn't have to endure as much cross-examination by really, intense defense counsel as she did.
It goes into the hands of a judge or a jury, and anything can happen.
The jury came back December 13th. Yeah, they came back in and said, not guilty. So, and I remember one of the jurors had tears in his eyes.
I just remember them saying that they're not guilty on any of the charges. I just remember them celebrating, and I understand they're celebrating that they're free, but the looks on their faces when they looked over was almost like they're celebrating because they didn't care.
What really got me, like a gut punch to the stomach, was when they were acquitted, that they came out hand in hand, best brothers. It's a joke.
They've been painting us as bad people, but now it's finally over. We get to take our life back and do something constructive with it.
At the end of the day, an 11-year-old boy is dead.
I understand, and my condolences go to the family, I understand their grief. A little boy has passed away, and that could have been me that night too. I got shot. I'm still here, and I thank God for that.
They all get away free. What kind of justice is this? This justice system is one screwed up justice system. My 11 years old boy, and they get acquitted for this. It's not right.
You should have spoke up for Ephraim. He was innocent. We are suffering. Our family is suffering. My brother is suffering.
We had one witness that came forward to do the right thing for her family, for the community, and ultimately it wasn't enough.
There were 50 people at that party, and nobody else came forward. I knew we had the right guys, but that's very different than proving it. And it's a high standard, as it should be, that you have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And we couldn't do that. We couldn't meet that standard.
Ephraim Brown was the light of the Brown family.
Angelic, passionate, handsome. He could have been anything he wanted to be.
In a class project, an autobiography, Ephraim wrote about who he wanted to be.
I want to get a scholarship. I also want to have 2 jobs. 2 of the jobs I would want are to be a mechanic and work at a body shop. I wish to have good friends instead of trouble. I want to stay in school. In the future, I want to be a smart man and have smart children. Basketball is my favorite sport, and I'm good at it too.
My brother's death changed me in the way that I dedicated the rest of my life to community work.
2 sisters dedicated to mentoring youth through the sport their baby brother loved most.
Oh, yeah! One of the ways that my family have been able to channel some of the feelings that we feel around this till this day into something positive in hopes that we can make a difference.
It started with creating a safe place for kids steps away from where Ephraim lived and died.
Ephraim's Place was a charity that was founded in honor of my brother.
The community center in the Jane Finch, Jane Shepherd area for youth and families, offering programs to help be successful in life.
Basketball programs became part of Ephraim's Place, soccer programs, after-school programs.
Since then, my family and I have founded the High Five Foundation.
Don't talk negative. Average people talk north. Average people talk proud.
Which is a registered Canadian charity that provides programming in sports, arts, and education for marginalized, primarily Black youth.
Phoenix ice cold from the charity stripe today.
Against dogs, we have towers in the center.
Let's bring this home.
And every summer they host the Phoenix Classic, an anti-gun violence basketball tournament.
We wanted to do it in July, the month that he had passed away. The Phoenix Classic grew to what is now tournaments and leagues and basketball teams. It's been a real therapeutic event and series of events for us because they're all done in Ephraim's memory, and all the young people that we're able to house in our events.
That's a part of the reason why I do it, is because those kids are just a little bit older than what he was, and some of them remind me of him.
To try to be a light or a positive role model or influence in their life that they could come to or talk to, in hopes that if they ever felt the need to pick up a gun, that they wouldn't, that they knew that they didn't have to, that they weren't alone.
The phoenix chosen to symbolize the meaning of Ephraim's name, blessing from adversity, or rise from the ashes.
We didn't want his name to die, that his memory to die. It brings me so much joy, more than you could know.
In 2011, in an unrelated matter, Gregory Sappleton was convicted of armed robbery and served 64 months in prison. In October of 2023, he was arrested and charged with possession of a controlled substance for the purpose of trafficking, and as of the date of this initial broadcast, is awaiting trial. Ephraim Brown's family continues to look for ways to honor his memory and to fight gang violence. Thank you for watching Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart.
Want more episodes of Crime Beat? Listen to the Crime Beat podcast now for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcast. And for past episodes of Crime Beat, go to the Global TV app, visit globaltv.com, or check out our Crime Beat YouTube page.